There isn't a visual difference between 8.24 and 8.25. The significant difference going to 8.24 was that I started working out special new dials for facial musculature. And for 8.25, I'm taking that finally to much greater levels. Now, one thing that drove me nuts about the very beginnings of 8.24 was this improved hair that I have here. And, if you look at the action figure in the box, the hair looks great. And right here, so in my defense, most of the time it did look fantastic, but there were so many times when just the way I would have to manipulate Linday's classic long and curly hair to deal with the conforming upper hair that's the more scraggly part, which I really like, but it becomes a workflow problem having to hand animate that whole top part of the hair because that's Laney hair, which is great hair. It's just for this project that it really, and right here, I'm doing a pretty decent job of getting a look that I want. But for the most part, say goodbye to that and just continue to develop and work with different ways of treating Linday's classic long and curly hair by itself. Now, this is 8.25 with some of the facial musculature dials that I've created. If you look on the right over here, you can see that there's quite a few of them firing as I scrub through. What I'm doing is adding nuances. And so with this one, I sped a lot of them up and held, some of the differences a little bit longer, and it makes it more natural looking. What these whole facial manipulations are supposed to do is to remove that plastic, I'm a CG doll kind of appearance. But it's really nice to work on them because here we are, it's not a whole lot of keyframes in there. Sure, it looks like quite a few, but they're just nice spread out. It's easy to see exactly where my changes are. All of the keyframes, one keyframe every frame. That's all down below on the figure level, on the from the hip level down. Here we're at the figure's pose control dial level. So it's really easy for us to see all of our different changes. Now let's take a step through and look at some of this, what we've got on my website here. We've got quite a few different versions that I have some write-ups about, even an attempt at a Rosie 9 that's incomplete. So we're not going to worry about that today. Rosie 8, here we are way down here. See, so all of the new information goes to the top of the page. And so if I scroll down a bit, you see I do a lot of talking about how I create her, but right here, this classic um, curly hair with D-Force by Linday. That's what got me into using Daz Studio in the first place. It's the one thing that I have that doesn't work in Carrara. So that's what started all of this. And now with these different generations of Daz Studio versions of Rosie, you know, I'm not proud of these I don't know where my mind was at when these shapes came about. It's obvious to me that I was thinking about other things. There's so much to think about. I'm learning how to use Daz Studio for one. I've always used it before, but not as my posing, animating, and rendering studio. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a fun time with it. These are the products I'm using to create these versions with, and they're nice little write-ups. I enjoy going through them, even though some of these results are horrific, but the details behind making them are sound. And now here we get to Rosie 7, which was a really special creation. I used Gen X2 to bring in shapes all the way from the whole Victoria 4 family with Ico 4 and Girl 4 and all of that, all the way through Genesis 2. And so here let's have a look at when when I first started using Daz Studio for this stuff, there was a whole lot of talk on the well, I shouldn't say a whole lot of talk. Every bit of talk on the forum, questions about can I animate in Daz Studio? Um, yeah, there was never a positive answer to that question. It was always no. You're gonna have to go to some other software like Blender or Maya or Houdini are popular ones that were being brought up. But so I would write back and say, no, 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 I'm animating in Daz Studio. And they come back, no, 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 you're mistaken. And, so I'd show like still images of some of my animations, and still images do not show off animations. It really doesn't. So I finally, started working a bit harder and put together this animation to demonstrate once and for all that yes, you can animate in Daz Studio. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And this all led to me being introduced to Digital Art Live, who got me to produce so far three nice courses on animation. And I have an ongoing series called The Creative Cart with many episodes out. Well, who am I? Well, I come from humble beginnings. uh, my name is Daniel Beck, and I go by Dartan Beck. And way back in, yeah, like the late 80s or something like that, I was a monster, and I was on our local TV channel. And and I've been a drummer my whole life. Here on my website in the gallery, there's even a little video of the band that I was in 1992. Uh, there's me rocking out on the drums, and there's my cool band. There's my cool drum set that I have now. Love that thing. Oh, 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 drumming is so, so cool. Yeah, just yeah, it makes you feel good inside, and it also really helps to keep the creative juices sparked. Now, speaking of humble beginnings, for the evolution of Rosie, Rosie has been on my mind long before I met her. I was always a fan of role-playing games, and I always played a female character, a rogue-like hero. Yeah, and then I brought that persona into a game called Neverwinter Nights, and to make it even more of a proper experience, I actually created the look using, well, back then, 3DS Max was owned by a company called Discrete, and they had a free version of it for budding game developers to play with. It was called Gmax. And the folks that made the wonderful plugins that allowed us to get our creations into Neverwinter Nights game also made a version for Gmax.
I did.
So yeah, I made this hair. And unlike the other long hairs that people were making, that they were completely attached to the head, so they'd poke through the torso and jet straight out of the back of the hair. I put the long part of the hair parented right on the torso, and it still has the
You're
jiggle that
kidding, right?
responds to wind and movement and things like that. And then I put the big mop on the top of her head, and it was all working like a ball joint kind of thing. And so this is I'm going through some of the emotes and things to show how nicely that works for such a low res thing. The highest resolution model in the game is the main good person, Erebeth, and that's only 1,000 polygons. I got Hall of Fame for this armor set, and you can in the game you can't just equip yourself with backpacks and stuff like that. That one's got a bow and arrows and a torch and stuff. This one, it's just a blousey kind of thing. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this, and I like to put this one back on so you can see the bow and the arrows. There's another one that's got dual swords. There's quite a few. There's a bunch of different combinations. But this is Neverwinter Nights, the first edition. And I like to think of it like these are, we're playing tabletop and those are the miniatures. And so I got to do this artwork for Neverwinter Con 4, which is the next Rosie edition. I don't have any other artwork from her. That's when one of the developers that I was working with introduced me to, he sent me this box, Curious Labs Poser 5. Yeah, see there, I'm talking about Gmax and 3ds Max. This is all on my website. And so I couldn't model in Poser. So that eventually led me to finding Carrara. And when I bought Carrara, I bought 6 Pro with an upgrade to 7 Pro, which came with a free version of 8 Pro once that actually came out. And so this is Rosie 4, very early in my Carrera days. Okay, so that was a lot of fun, and I did a lot of animating, but through those years, even that video was made using nothing but a bunch of test clips that were destined for the recycle bin. Learning new technologies. In the process, I became a Daz PA and made a few Carrara products and did promos for those, and went to school there. There's my VFX homework for school, and yeah, VFX for guerrilla filmmakers. And then we finally get to where a movie, Alita Battle Angel, came out, and I was inspired to create a whole new Rosie. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosie 5.
Here we are once again inside Carrara 8.5 Pro. Is this thing on? Yeah? Oh, okay. Introducing Rosie 5. Come on, Rosie. Come on. There she is. Adorable. Okay. Okay. We call her Rosie 5 to keep with the newer Genesis naming conventions. So according to her name, we can tell that she's based on the first generation of Daz 3D's Genesis figure. But she is no ordinary Genesis 1 figure. In addition to using many of the Genesis Evolution morphs and other products that I bought for Genesis 1, I've used a lot of legacy Victoria 4 and newer Genesis 2 shaping morphs with the help of Dimension 3D's Genesis Generation X2, which we call Gen X2 for short. Using Gen X2, I've added some shaping morphs from Victoria 4 Morphs Plus Plus, all of the expressions and some of the body morphs to help with movement, like breathing, for example. I've also added 15 expressions that come with the Girl 4, along with the 13 that came with V4 Elite Reby Sky, and a few shaping morphs that came with Stephanie 4. But most of Rosie's actual shape comes from Genesis 2 Female. Genesis 2 Female base shape and all of the expression morphs that I've collected, plus Gia 6, Ico 6, and Kiko 6, along with anything else that I thought might be useful. In the written tutorial on my website, we'll also explore how I work from a minimalized list of Genesis morphs when I create the final character. This helps to keep the file size more efficient, but even more important, it keeps the parameters tab free from sliders that I know I'm never going to want to use. They just get in the way. Another major advancement for Rosie 5 is her new, bigger and better hair. It took a bit of trial and error, using all the advice I could get, especially from Carrara forum member John Stark and his amazing video tutorials on the subject, but also valuable tips from Wendy Loves Cats, Phil W., Holly Wet Circuit, Evil Producer, 3D Lust, and more. This is Carrara's dynamic hair. Here, I'm only showing the guide hairs so we can see how the simulation calculated. I'm using 4 separate hair sets to get this to work, and instead of using a conformed proxy figure for the hair collisions, I'm using separate low polygon count shapes paired to different parts of the body, as you can see here. I'm only using them where contact would mean a necessary collision: head, neck, arms, and torso. One could simply use sphere primitives for this, but I opted to model my own simple shapes so that I knew I was using quads. It seems that when we fit a conforming proxy to Genesis, the mesh turns into trigons, which doesn't always give the best results for dynamic hair. We can set the collision distance of the hair simulation. So we might think that I could simply do that to get the big hair that I'm looking for. Well, the problem with that is there ends up being too much empty space around her head, especially during most animation performances. So instead of changing the size and locations of various collision objects for each set of hair for each animation, I needed a more practical solution. For me, the solution is Carrara's physical forces. They're in here, but let's hide these collision objects so we can see all the forces I have parented to the rig. There we go. I've got several point forces in here. To keep them from obstructing my view as I work, I've scaled them way down and parented them to where they need to go and set their forces according to what I need them to do. This one in the middle pulls in while this one in the neck pushes out to create the shape of the hair. But that also requires that these three on the bottom are pulling down or the hair would just float outward. The bottom forces are also responsible for keeping the hair from being too dynamic. I explain more about how I use the forces for shaping and controlling dynamics in the tutorial on my website. To bring it all together, I'm again using Ideas 3 Plus for V4 and M4 by Archie, who's also available at Daz 3D. These eye figures allow for more complete control over all of the various surfaces of each eye, both in shaders as well as shape, which is important to me, especially with this character. I've used Ideas 3 for my previous version and really liked them. So very recently, I decided to also try something I've been eyeing for a long time, an older Generation 3 product by Daz called Millennium Teeth. For some reason, probably because she's so tiny, I've always struggled with trying to get Rosie's teeth smaller. Daz 3D started off making anatomically correct human diagrams for the medical profession, so who better to use actual dental reference material to create incredibly realistic teeth? It took some doing, which I'll explain further in an article on my website at dartanbeck.com. Basically, I ended up converting the conforming object into a prop, dividing the upper and lower halves and fitting them and parenting them to Genesis, hiding the original gums and teeth. So there she is, the all-new Rosie 5. I'll be using this introduction as a launch pad for more tutorials, ideas, and showcases of more of my animation work, and also for the website I've been working on. The goal of all of this is to combine videos, written articles, and links to more information to help illustrate my adventures of creating fully CGI movies using Carrara 8.5 Pro, along with advice and tutorials regarding the other software I use to bring it all to life. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you all along the way.
Okay, now I worked long and hard to try and get that dynamic hair in Carrara working better, trying to get rid of those jitters that are so apparent in there because it's so long and so curly. I could never seem to achieve getting rid of that.
Mimic Pro for Carrara is an advanced tool that creates and edits facial animations for 3D figures by making them accurately mimic the correct lip movements for a pre-recorded speech segment, allowing figures to talk and sing.
This is Rosie 5.5. Like Rosie 5, she's built on Daz 3D's Genesis 1 technology, enhanced through Genesis Generation X2, giving her shapes and features from Generations 4 and 6. This time, however, she was built from the ground up, within Daz Studio. By doing this, she is still fully compatible within Carrara, but can also leverage all of the tools and technology of Daz Studio, making her a lot more versatile than her previous edition. Here is an example of my earliest tests with this on the all-new Rosie 5.5.
Hi. I'm Rosie 5.5. Like D'Artan's Rosie 8 figure? My face begins with another beautiful character by Thorn. She's pretty, and I love the way she looks, but I don't look like Jessica Alba. So we added hints of Keiko and the Girl 6, and then used a bunch of shaping morphs from Generations 4, 5 and 6 to complete my face. Rosie 8 has this wonderful geometry-based hair that gets simulated through Daz Studio's D-Force Physics Simulator. I told D'Artan I want that hair. So he used the transfer utility to fit it to the Genesis 1 base figure. And voila! It works on me too. It's called D-Force Classic Long and Curly Hair, by Linde, available at Daz 3D. D'Artan has had a lot of fun creating the look of the hair in Octane Render's Node Graph Editor. I think he likes that sort of work. It's not easy being a digital character. Like, the digital oranges might look like a real orange, but they don't taste any different from digital motor oil.
Dynamic character animation in Daz Studio by D'Artan Beck through the magic of Digital Art Live and Daz 3D. This video course follows D'Artan Beck through an entire animation project from an unposed character through simulating the clothing and hair in D-Force, then rendering an eye ray and even a basic composite of the final result over the back plate. This system utilizes custom tools that we build into our figures and is very easy to use, making our animations turn out exactly how we envision them to be. but much more. We can alter the action of the animation entirely while still retaining the valuable motion capture data. Even better, and unlike using the graph editor, using this system is entirely non-destructive to the original motion capture, so we can revert back to its original state at any time. These are the results of the first part of the course, and it's only one of the many possibilities. We could change the lighting, the backdrop, the camera angle, and use this same animation for other purposes. The second part of the course dives deep into building this system into our own base figures. Build it into the base figure and it will work on any character using that base, even files that you may have saved previously. To better grasp all of this, we'll begin with an extensive look at the design I've used for Rosie 7 and compare the difference between her and another figure that doesn't have the system. In the next separate video, we dive right in and show you how to build your own system according to your own needs. This procedure is very simple and quick to employ, and the end result is powerful, making animating in Daz Studio an absolute pleasure to animate in. In this second half of the course, D'Artan Beck covers how he creates partial ani-blocks like the ones shown in Part 1. Demonstrates the power we have in making our own custom wearables and shows how to make them. Takes us on a tour through Rosie 7's base scene and explains the importance of having an animator's base scene. And demonstrates 2 methods for converting animations from other generations of Daz figures. The bonus content includes 2 behind-the-scenes looks at Rosie 7's cyberpunk-style demonstration video. Animating the backplate that matches the moving cameras of the character render. A complete look behind the making of the car chase scene, with more than 100 animated people going about their business in a huge city scene made using Stonemason's Urban Sprawl 3 that has been cyberpunked using Polish's Cyberpunk Back Alley bundle, with the car chase being driven using Linde's amazing 4-wheeler animation template system. And it all fits within my 6 GB graphics card. You'll also get an enhanced version of the actual video in 1080 HD. After taking this course, you'll see why I'm having such a great time animating in Daz Studio, and I hope you'll agree that you will too. Dynamic character animation in Daz Studio by D'Artan Beck through the magic of Digital Art Live and Daz 3D. It has always been so common to hear that we shouldn't even try animating in Daz Studio. So common that throughout most of my 3D animating journey, I believed it. Still, in my first series of purchases at Daz 3D, when I bought Carrara, I bought Animate 2, the Aniblock importer for Carrara, and started collecting Aniblocks anytime I could. I did my own keyframe animation too. Getting acquainted with Daz Studio, I felt pretty embarrassed that I let such rumors and untruths get to my head. Still, during that time, when I did believe them, I still used Daz Studio on occasion to go into Animate 2, work with Aniblocks, and save out new Aniblocks that I could import back into Carrara. Discovering a new way to animate in Daz Studio, as I've laid out in my dynamic character animation course, has truly changed how I view animating in Studio. Not only is it really easy, but it's really, really fun. Let me show you how I do all of this in Daz Studio. In a live webinar experience, I'll be right there with Studio open, doing my thing.
If you need clarification, or if you have a question that I'm not covering, ask. If there's one thing that you should have all picked up on about me by now, is that I love to answer questions about what I do.
not afraid.
Boy, I'm addicted to you, and I'm constantly dreaming about the things we could do. When you enter the room, my knees start shaking and my heart goes boom. I have this stupid little question for you. Never felt this before. I'm playing it cool, but deep inside I want more. Nothing's ever felt so real. I have to tell you how I feel when you are close to me. My heart seems to drown. If you were my boyfriend and I was your girl, wouldn't it be the cutest thing in the world? I have this stupid little question for you.
Okay, now that brings us full circle again. Now this is Rosie 8.25, and this was just made, still in development to this day. We're still looking for ways to come up with a feasible Rosie 9 solution, and until then, we'll just keep developing Rosie 8 and going for it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I know it's a long time to sit and watch something, but hey, if you're into this stuff like I am, you probably really liked it. Thanks. Have a good day. Oh, what a blast.